What is up, everybody? It is a big business day on this Monday, January 19th. The Buffalo Bills have fired 9-year head coach Sean McDermott, the third most winningest active coach in the NFL after another playoff exit in the divisional round. Ryan, we're going to react to this news. We're going to give our thoughts. Brandon Beane is staying on in the role of general manager and will lead the search for the new head coach. We'll get into all of it. I think the best place to start, though, is just the shocking nature of this, because I think if you go back to 13 seconds, there has been a collection of Bills fans that have been waiting for the Bills to try something different at the head coach position. And I think even after this last loss, this is probably Sean McDermott's best coaching job. So it comes as a major shock in the morning. But I think that there are reasons for it. We'll get into all of that. But what's your initial reaction?
Stunned. I was stunned when the news came across my timeline. I was working on a completely different story. I was telling you, I'm just kind of like chilling out of the morning, writing, watching Saved by the Bell reruns on the Roku channel. And all of a sudden that comes across, and it's shocking to me. You mentioned it. This was his finest coaching job. He had a CVS-sized receipt list of injuries this year, and he still led them to a playoff berth, led them to a wild card win. And if we're being honest, if the Bills protected the football better on Saturday, they're in the championship game against the Patriots this upcoming weekend. Now, mind you can look at the decision to be aggressive before halftime, pin that on him. But his overall coaching job this year, with the talent overall in this roster, really spoke for itself. And I thought he did a great job.
Yeah. So I think couple things that I'm thinking about at the start here. Number one, you'd have to wonder how much Josh Allen had, I don't want to say a role in this, but was made aware of it. I mean, obviously this is a very close circle with Brandon Beane, who's obviously very close with Josh, Sean McDermott and Allen, and the story came out, I think it was like a month and a half ago, with McDermott and how close he's become with Josh over the years. But I do think, if I'm trying to figure out the exact thing that pushed Terry Pegula, again, we haven't talked to Terry Pegula since 2019, so it's hard to surmise what's actually the thinking of the move. Year after year, the Bills have spent countless defensive resources in free agency, in the draft. And you go back to last April, and, I was thinking about it over the last couple of days, and Brandon Beane's commentary around the interview with WGR and then the interviews that he did leading up to the season. He made it a point even on our show to say, we went out and we made sure to get a bunch of defensive players for weapons for Sean McDermott's defense. And I know that Josh Allen in this offense played a crazy game with 5 turnovers. They still scored 30 points, Ryan. So your season is ending in the playoffs once again, allowing 30-plus points to a Bo Nix-led offense, and maybe that was the breaking point. And I wonder how much over the last couple of weeks, as we've talked about maybe a simmering tension between the two sides, if on the team side there isn't a frustration with how much has been spent on defense. And then to look at the unbelievable lack of production for the defensive line in that game against Bo Nix and company, maybe that was the tipping point.
It could. And the defense has underwhelmed many years for a variety of reasons. A lot of it is just up front with that defensive line not being able to get home consistently. But they've also had a lot of great successes. You look at how it started out with Poyer and Hyde on the back end, the Trey White draft pick and the success he has had, the linebacker play of Milano and Bernard before this season. The list goes on. Ed Oliver, I would say, would be a good hit on that D-line, one of the few. And it's tough, though, because you pointed out, they let up 30 points again in a postseason game, 33 to be exact. 13 of those, though, came off of turnovers by the Bills offense. Again, in this league, I get it. Patience runs thin and among the fan base. McDermott's been here for quite a few years. They've never been able to even get to the Super Bowl. So I think there are legitimate reasons. But when you take a step back and look at this year, and look at all the injuries that he had to deal with, the mixing and the matching and signing guys off of practice squads, losing cornerbacks late in the year with the whole, Darius Slay debacle. And I know Jamarcus Ingram's just a depth guy, but really could have used him out there in that playoff game rather than having to throw out Dane Jackson. It's just all of these little decisions that kind of come together lead to this, the unknown. It's the uncertainty of it all, Matt, because are the Bills going to go with an offensive-minded guy now? Are they going to look for a defensive-minded coach? Because you see the way the Seahawks and the Texans are dominating on defense. I know the Texans got eliminated yesterday, but that defense kept them in that game completely. It's just, there's a saying about the devil you know versus the devil you don't. You don't know what you're replacing Sean McDermott with, and there's a big risk involved with that.
Here's something that I really spent some time looking around at over the last couple of days in the aftermath of that loss and thinking about my stance on where things stood with Sean McDermott. And I felt like the first moment I even felt a shred of openness to the idea of a new head coach. Take Brandon out of it for a second. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. Was as I'm watching the Rams game last night and Ben Johnson and what he has done with that Chicago Bears team in the first season. I was always that guy who was like, listen, Ben Johnson is this great offensive mind, but you don't know anything about him, what he's going to do as a head coach. They had a chance to win that game. I mean, if Caleb Williams doesn't throw that interception in overtime, they might go on and they might be playing in the NFC title game. What he's done in year one there with a second-year quarterback, I just think that the big impetus behind this decision, and we'll hear from people around the team and we'll figure it all out. I go back to our conversation with Brandon Beane on the Shout podcast going into the season and how much he emphasized the point it was to go out and get as many defensive players for Sean McDermott's defense, because that's how they've gone out in so many seasons. And now we sit here today and you look back at this game as they're doing the, going back and figuring things out. It was a good defensive performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? But then the next round, I know it's on a short week, and I know that there were a lot of turnovers, but I think giving up 33 points, it almost feels like this might have been the outcome no matter how it ended, had the season ended this way.
It very well could have. It could have just been like what happened in Baltimore when they asked the owner about John Harbaugh and, had he defeated Pittsburgh in the final week of the season, would they be where they are now? And he said, well, probably a week later. So maybe ownership was just at that point where if you don't win it all this year, that's the end. And maybe we find that out in due time. But, you just mentioned Ben Johnson, and I think Ben Johnson is going to be a fantastic head coach long-term in Chicago. But he's the reason they're not in the NFC Championship game this upcoming weekend. He passed on 3 field goals in that matchup, and I get it. He's the aggressive-minded head coach. He came from that Lions team where they go for it, go for it, go for it. First series of the game, passes on a field goal. They throw an interception on 4th down. Turnover on downs where they could have kicked a field goal. Late in the game, too, they had 3 opportunities to kick field goals where they would have gone up in that game or been up in that game without even needing Caleb Williams to throw that miracle throw at the end of regulation. So maybe it doesn't even go to overtime. So again, for as brilliant as this guy is, he showed some warts and some hiccups in a game where sometimes in the playoffs, you don't pass up on the points and you do take the layups. And he's probably kicking himself right now. So for every, brilliant mind, whether it's offense, defense, whoever they bring in, there's going to be some hiccups along the way and some issues. I just, I can't envision anyone coming in here and it being smooth sailing. There's going to be some issues in the next year or two.
Right. I guess I maybe shouldn't have put it all on the game, more so what
right.
he was able to accomplish in
absolutely.
the year. And I look around the remaining teams left here, and outside of Sean Payton, who's probably a future Hall of Famer, you have 3 coaches that are within the first 2 years. Or no, not McVay. If the Bears would have won, but Mike McDonald in Seattle and what he's done there. There's been a ton of examples. Mike Vrabel in his first season with the New England Patriots, and I wonder how much that had a little bit of an impact on the move. You lose the division, and now the Patriots have a gift-wrapped opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, and maybe that's something that maybe pushed Terry Pegula over the end. I know, you think about who are the people around Terry Pegula. Pete Gwelly came in at the tail end of the stadium situation. He's very much positioned in a position of power alongside of Terry Pegula. So maybe his observations since he's come aboard and watching the infrastructure here led to the decision to keep Beane and company. But back to the point that I was trying to make. You go back to all of the big maneuvers that the Bills have made on defense over the years. And I'm not pinning that on Sean McDermott at all, right? But I'd say for their failed ability to work out, like Kyer Elam was probably the best example. I think that Brandon Beane has to wear that for the most part. But I do think when year after year after year, you're spending all of these resources on defense and handing a defensive head coach all of these new players to try to mold into what exactly he needs. And you had 9 years to give the GM the blueprint of what you needed to be successful, the kind of players that you needed him to go out and get. And if you're the head coach, and it's not working out, get in there with him. This is something I brought up last offseason. Get in there with him, roll your sleeves up in January, and make sure that the guys that he's drafting are the guys that are going to work in your defense. Here's the other thing that I think might have done Sean McDermott in this season. Were they not internally, did they not see how much better it was defensively when he was calling the defense as opposed to Bobby Babbitt, yet he continued to kind of run this, dual defensive coordinator thing that just never seemed to really work out. And then, oh, sorry, I just read your text. And then it just felt like he was kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, coddling Bobby Babbitt a little bit. Like they have Ken Dorsey a couple years ago who gets fired mid-season. It wasn't going well for the defense early in the season, and almost like he just wanted to spare Bobby Babbitt at every turn, and maybe that had a role in all this.
It definitely could have had a role in this. And at the end of the year, if you go back to all the playoff exits over the years, it's been the defense that has essentially been the issue with this team. So if you are looking at it big picture, whole career-wise, yes, you can always say at the end of the day, the defense is kind of what cost the Bills from ever advancing to a Super Bowl or having a chance to win it all. So the clock may have just ticked out and on McDermott, and we may find that out from Beane here in the near future. It's just, you look at it and you're right. You look at all the assets in the draft that went on the defense side of the ball over the years, and they bring in Von Miller, and Miller's supposed to be the guy that gets you over the hill or gets you to the big game. He looks the part until he suffers a lower body injury. They've tried Bosa. They've added a lot of veteran pieces over the years too, and there's just never been that consistency among the defensive line. There's always games where the Bills defense looks out of sorts in season. So I do get it big picture wise. I guess but when the news came across, I looked at it from the 2025 season perspective, where I thought McDermott really coached his butt off this year, made some great adjustments late in the year with the disguised looks, the throwing the Rolodex at opposing teams, and the confusion that led to, and the success that the team had overall.
Good comment here over on X. I noticed a lot of small shots being thrown during interviews with Brandon Beane from Sean McDermott, like bringing up the Myers trade multiple times, and also when he was asked, is the team good enough, and he didn't really say anything. Maybe that did play inside the building. Like, that was very uncharacteristic of Sean McDermott. And to me, looking back, hindsight being 2020, definitely feels like some insecurity in that behavior after so many years of like this lockstep with the general manager. And I'm not absolving. We got a $20 super chat here. I'm going to get this up. give it its run here. I'm not absolving Brandon Beane. We're going to get into the pressure that now sits on the table of general manager Brandon Beane. I will continue to say that I think that Brandon Beane has done a lot more good than bad for this team. And we'll get into the details of that and some of the players. But, he is going to help lead the coach, the search for a new head coach. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a part of things for the long term. I mean, the pressure's on. This is the most important offseason for Brandon Beane in his tenure, and that might be how Terry Pegula is approaching it.
Yeah, this is huge for the Bills. They are at a crossroads of sorts, and I am not in the belief that Josh Allen's prime is over anytime soon. We talked about this on the last show or 2 shows ago. He is about to turn 30. He has probably another decade left in this league, and I would say probably 5 to 8 years of still a very high, if not elite level. I mean, you can see what Matthew Stafford's done this year, playing one of his best seasons ever, what Brady did late in his career. You can still play at an extremely high level in your late 30s and 40s. So I think that you're still in a great shape there. But I also look at, like, this is such a bizarre year to cut ties with McDermott. There is no big splashy name out there like there have been in years past. If the Bills go with an offensive-minded coach that's not internal like Joe Brady or a retread like Brian Dable, then you're really rolling the dice on some unknown entities. You can go off the Sean McDermott tree. Nate Schlierhouse is a name that I really like. Clint Kubiak with the Seahawks.
Sean McVay tree?
McVay tree. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, McVay tree. So, there's guys, but you don't know what you're getting with these guys that are in their, 30s, young. Schlierhouse, for instance, hasn't really called plays, but he's a hot candidate. He's really risen through the ranks, supposed to be like Iowa State's heir apparent before they took him away on the Rams. So there's guys out there, but man, it's not like last year with Ben Johnson and even Liam Cohen, some of the names where people thought, okay, these are hot candidates to kind of really try to get in the mix on.
If you want to get in the mix this week, I know the Bills aren't playing any more football, but obviously the championship weekend is always a big party weekend for football fans. Head over to Tops Friendly Markets right now in this playoff season. Let Tops do the cooking, and you'll be the real MVP. Visit takeoutmeals.topsmarkets.com and elevate your food game with great selection of custom cakes, desserts, pizzas, sandwiches, fresh fruit, cheese trays, fried chicken, and so much more. Save time and easily shop from with the convenience of no-fee pickup on all game day deals. There are no service fees, no tips, just the best deals in town. All right, Super Chat here from Charles. Could this have anything to do with players not wanting to play in Buffalo because they think if we go play for that staff, we will get robbed in the postseason? Your thoughts on Salah or Joe Brady? I hadn't really thought of it from that angle, but I mean, I do think that your reputation precedes you in a lot of ways, right? Like as the Bills maybe look to try to build a championship caliber roster this offseason, Josh Allen is coming off of his worst playoff performance since his sophomore season in Houston. So maybe changing the dynamic and trying to make sure that things don't remain stale inside the building is a way the Bills are trying to energize things a little bit. Your thoughts on Robert Saleh or Joe Brady? I'm not a huge fan of the Salah idea, and the Joe Brady piece is interesting. I think he is probably still a top head coaching candidate on the market, but I'd probably go start digging through the cupboards in LA and Sean McVay's staff before I promote Joe Brady. But you also have to wonder how much Josh Allen has an impact on this decision.
Right. Allen's had his say many times over the years in terms of OCs, at least when Dable took the job with the Giants. He's the one that kind of picked the next two. And obviously they were internal hires. Ken Dorsey was already on the staff, as was, Joe Brady. But if I am Terry Pegula, if I'm Brandon Beane, I'm at least, checking in with Allen. Hey, there's a few offensive-minded guys out there. How would you feel about this? I'm not letting Allen make the final decision by any means, but you want to check in with your franchise guy, see what his thoughts are, because it's never been an offensive-minded system or a coach here in his tenure, because it's been Sean McDermott his entire time. And it might be time to try that out. And, Robert Saleh, I like him as a defensive coordinator. I didn't think that his tenure as a head coach with the Jets went well. And again, it's the Jets. I get that. Aaron Glenn didn't have any success there either in his first year. And it might just be the ownership, everything else with that team. But it's tough for me to think that he's going to come in and suddenly be this upgrade over what the Bills have had already with a defensive-minded head coach.
We're about 4,500 people watching live. It is a big news day here on Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast. And I think the best place to go next, Ryan, is the Brandon Beane factor in all of this, because I think what makes this extra shocking is that you have a general manager who went on local radio, like we mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, last offseason, and basically scolded the two hosts and by default the fan base who has been crying out for wide receiver talent in the wake of the Stephon Diggs trade. I mean, a big portion of them were crying out for it while Diggs was still on the roster. Like adding more weapons for Josh Allen has been a big piece of this. So keeping him in place to run another offseason is, again, a huge point of contention amongst fans this morning. What the most feedback I'm seeing on social media in the comments here is that people want a full cleaned house. Get rid of the coach, get rid of that general manager, start a completely new vision inside the building. But with Brandon Beane staying, that's not necessarily the case. Do you agree with it?
I thought that if you were going to fire one, you might have had to fire both, and clearly that's not the case. And maybe it's just something where the relationship built between Pagula and Beane is so strong that Beane, his job is kind of, safe, I guess. It's tough. I look at the Sabres. I look at Kevin Adams and how long he stayed there with abysmal records and teams and the patience shown there. So I can't sit here today and say I'm shocked that Brandon Beane kept his job, because he's had a lot more success in that GM role with the Bills than Adams ever had there. And Pagula's patient in that regard. I guess he probably felt comfortable enough knowing who Beane is as a person, as a GM, to go out there and you're trusting this guy to orchestrate the head coaching search, bring in the best candidate to get those prime years out of Allen into a Super Bowl win. And that's what it comes down to for me, because if you're looking, both of them had their flaws. Drafting, sometimes those early round draft picks have not been the best for Brandon Beane. He's hit some jackpots though late in the draft. You look at Deion Walker on day 3. I'll still say that Hawes this year is a big time hit, despite his limited snaps based on his role. But he finds guys that really fit the system. Christian Benford made up for the Elam pick, but you want your guys in the GM role batting a little bit better in terms of your percentage on hits. More home runs maybe along the way than what the Bills have had. But at the same time, he's built some pretty good rosters. He's found some free agents on good deals. He's done enough, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, to keep this job. But it is tough, because a lot of the times when one goes, both go.
Here's what I would say to fans that are frustrated about this. I think you're going to see a complete shift in the approach this offseason. I think it's going to be offensive heavy. If I was sitting here predicting right now, I think they're going to go out and try to get an offensive head coach. If you're moving on from McDermott, you're going to probably want to go in a different direction. That could mean multiple things. You mentioned a couple of young offensive coordinator. Clint Kubiak is one that I think probably will get an interview. I don't know where the latest is with things with him in terms of what he's doing, but he's probably somebody that gets a look. Joe Brady's probably going to. I still think Brian Dable probably gets a look. I mean, his relationship with Josh Allen, for sure. But I think, if you've been clamoring for a heavy approach on the offensive side of the ball, that's what this move also signals to me, is that the Bills are going to go all in on this offense. Because how many times year in and year, it can't really get much worse, Ryan. Like when you think about averaging almost 32 points per game in your playoff losses over the last 6 times, I mean, you could probably ignore defense this offseason and probably still figure it out. And here's another little caveat. You've mentioned this multiple times in the show. I don't think Jim Schwartz is going to get the head coaching job in Cleveland. Maybe he ends up getting it. We'll see. But wouldn't that just be an ultimate win-win, is if you can get a young, hot offensive coordinator as a head coach and bring in a Jim Schwartz to run the defense. And that way that side of the ball is set and everything can be about building the offense and getting it positioned to really go on a run. And I'll have you react to that. And we got the super chat as well.
So I also want to preface this for fans. When the Bills interview candidates for the head coaching job, sometimes those candidates are also going to be in mind for a defensive coordinator job, an offensive coordinator job, depending on who they ultimately select. You see that sometimes where they're brought in for that head coaching interview and maybe they don't get the job, but maybe it's still the OC job, for instance, in Buffalo would be a promotion over what Schleelhaus currently does with the Rams. Maybe they can convince him to become the OC here. With Jim Schwartz, supposedly the ownership wants to keep him on as defensive coordinator if he doesn't get the head coaching job, but that's all going to come down to whoever they end up hiring there. He would be a brilliant defensive coordinator hire if the Bills wanted to bring him in for a head coaching interview too, though. I wouldn't be opposed to that. He has a ton of experience, but sometimes these interviews too are also looking for coordinator candidates at the end of the day.
We got a super chat here. You can't just continue to burn through Allen's prime with never reaching a Super Bowl. This is from Chris. It was time. It's about wins, not great locker rooms. Yeah, I think there's some validity to that. I also think this is another big point that you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results, right? Like this group has been together for a long enough sample size to understand its strengths and weaknesses, where it's fallen short. And it does feel like, it definitely felt like in the locker room. So the locker room was the most, it's a locker room I'd never seen one like that before. The emotions in it. Our editor Nate just texted us and had a great point. Is like how many people maybe knew that this was on the line, and maybe that led to some of the emotions. He's a very much beloved coach in the room, but it almost felt like in a lot of ways we were writing the same stories that we had written the previous 3 playoffs. Right. It's the same ending. It's the same way, a little bit different. The chaos of Josh Allen in that game was an aberration, but the end result and watching some of these other teams move on, that was the key different piece, and maybe something that pushed Terry Pagula over the edge. You know, the other thing too, for me, I keep coming back to thinking about this, and this is maybe another part of why I maybe shifted a little bit on maybe it's okay to move on from McDermott and start to think about a different idea. The John Elway and the Peyton Manning examples really resonated to me over the last year. I mean, we started this season covering the Bills when I sat down with Sean McDermott and I asked him about that very critical stat about quarterback head coach combinations that don't win a Super Bowl together in their first 5 seasons, never do. And now we're sitting here 9 seasons and it's still, they haven't even reached a Super Bowl. And so I think what I really keep coming back to with the Elway and Manning examples is how much just you build it from the ground up, you figure out where things need to be addressed, and then you address it with the coaching change. And that is what gets you over the hump. It worked in those examples. And I think the Elway example, more than anything, to me, is the great example, because where would he have been without Shanahan?
Yeah, and you do look at some of these teams that fire a head coach, the next year they win a Super Bowl with the new head coach, or a year or 2 down the line. And I know they didn't fire Cowher in Pittsburgh, but Tomlin inherits that roster, wins the Super Bowl in Pittsburgh, and you can look at the Gruden and other cases like that. So sometimes if you feel like your roster has enough talent to win it all, you might just feel like you've reached that point of no return. It's something where you just need to move on, turn the page. Like I said, it's just difficult because McDermott really did come off of a great season as a head coach this year, and he's going to become a hot candidate elsewhere. You're going to see him start popping up and getting interviews for some of these remaining jobs. And I wouldn't be shocked if, Miami became like a right on his tail. The new GM there had this great interview about fast. I'm going to butcher it, but something about fast players, get a little bit slower at the end of the year, but tough player, I don't know, strong players don't get weak or something like that. Like, he realizes that roster's a little bit flawed right now. They were too dependent on speed. They need a little bit of toughness and grit. So I could see a McDermott going in there and helping change the culture. There's Cleveland, or not Cleveland, excuse me. Well, there are other jobs where I could see him coming in and popping up and being a candidate. I could see Baltimore. The list kind of goes on and on. He's going to, I think he'll land a head coaching job this year if he wants to coach this year. As for the Bills, I guess it's just time to turn the page, try something new. Hope to have that same kind of success that other coaches have had when they inherit a good roster, get them over the top, get them to the top of the mountain, and maybe that's what the Bills are thinking at this point in time.
All right, Ryan. So we have the statement officially from the Buffalo Bills. Let's get into this.
Yep.
The Bills announced that Sean McDermott has been relieved of his duties as head coach. Sean has done an admirable job of leading our football team for the past 9 seasons, said owner Terry Pegula. But I feel we are in need of a new structure within our leadership to give this organization the best opportunity to take our team to the next level. We owe that to our players and to Bills Mafia. Sean helped change the mindset of this organization and was instrumental in the Bills becoming a perennial playoff team. I respect all the work, loyalty, and attention to detail he showed for this team and the community. I wish Sean, Jamie, and his family all the best. Moving forward, Brandon Beane will now serve as the president of football operations and general manager of the Buffalo Bills. Brandon will oversee all facets of our football operation, including the oversight of our coaching staff. I have full faith in and have witnessed Brandon's outstanding leadership style and have confidence in his abilities to lead our organization. Beane will be leading the search for a new head coach and will be working directly with Pegula and Pete Gwelly, who will now serve as president of business operations during the interview and hiring process. Okay, so this is a big statement. There's a lot in here. So what I think this tells you is that over the last 9 seasons, McDermott and Brandon Beane have been 2 lines on the org chart directly reporting to Terry Pegula. The new structure for whoever the Bills hire will place Brandon Beane in a much more powerful role where he'll have say over the roster, and he'll probably also have say over some of the game day playing decisions, and the coach will report directly to Brandon Beane, which is a huge departure from what happened. And I think, or how the structure was, it was always going to be like that because McDermott was hired before Brandon Beane. But I think what is ultimately taking place here, Ryan, is a 9-year sample size. And it's not just reacting to 2025. Like, I think that's an important thing that fans have to understand, is that this decision seems to be based on more than just this season. And I think if you would have taken the temperature back after the 13-second game, it would be a lot different reaction had the trigger been pulled that day, as opposed to how it's been pulled today. I'm not absolving Brandon Beane. I know people are going to think, oh, you're siding with Brandon Beane. We haven't seen this structure play out. Right. And I also think that Brandon has a very close relationship with Josh Allen. If you would have asked me back in the 2021 season, I would have said Brandon Beane was closer to Josh Allen than Sean McDermott. And so I'm not surprised at this, but it definitely places a lot more pressure on Brandon Beane.
Yeah, and it tells me that this was not a one-year decision. This was a multi-year decision after seeing the results over the course of many years, playoff runs ending without a championship. So that at least, makes more sense to me. In the moment, it was stunning to see that come across the timeline today that McDermott was fired. Brandon Beane gets a promotion out of this. So now he, I don't want to say he's on the hot seat, but there's more eyes on him in terms of building this up the right way, getting the right head coach candidate. And it does make you wonder, going back to that previous super chat, if players did know, because what came out of the locker room yesterday was Shaq Thompson and Reggie Gilliam pretty much saying, we told Beane we want to be back next year. Like, they went to the GM saying we want to come back. There's nothing about we went to Sean saying we want to come back. So maybe the players did know something about that, and that led to the extra emotions in the locker room. We may not ever find that out. Maybe that plays a role in Aaron Kromer saying, all right, I'm going to retire. I'm going to call it a career. I don't know who this next guy coming in is. Or there's whispers that he was going to probably retire this year anyways. There's a lot of what ifs now at the end of the day. But when you look at the relationship, Pegula is around Beane a lot more than he is around McDermott, because McDermott was preparing week in, week out, watching the film, all this other stuff. When Pegula is around, he's with Beane. He's with some of the other front office personnel. So it doesn't surprise me that Beane is the one left standing and getting a promotion out of this. But yeah, I'm glad the statement came out while we were on our live broadcast here.
Here's a name to watch. And I don't know how it plays out. And I think it would be a big baller move, if you will. Davis Webb, the quarterback's coach in Denver, spent the last 2, maybe 3 seasons with Sean Payton now as the quarterback's coach, maybe 2 or 3. Very close relationship with Josh Allen, very close relationship with Brandon Beane. And I don't know if that's the move at head coach. Again, he's not even called plays yet, I don't believe. But if you want to talk about a guy that was built to be a coach, I mean, he was a coach before he even stopped playing the game. The relationship that he has with Josh Allen, it is being reported right now by Peter Schrager that obviously Joe Brady and Brian Dable are names to watch, but he also throws in Davis Webb, who's already interviewed with Las Vegas and I think one other team. Davis Webb as the head coach. How does that hit you versus maybe a Dable-Webb pairing, like Dable as the head coach and then Webb as the offensive coordinator? But again, that's challenging because I think Dable would call the plays unless Dable's taking the job to then say, I want Davis Webb to call the plays. Like, or would you go a completely different route? Where are you sitting right now?
So Webb's in my article that I'm working on right now for candidates for the job. He's another one of those young offensive-minded coaches that are getting interviews. He interviewed with the Raiders and with the Ravens, so he's drawing some interest. And again, sometimes these teams are just kind of interviewing young minds for coordinator jobs. Maybe he doesn't get the head coaching job, but they bring him in as a coordinator. It doesn't hurt to check it out because, again, Sean Payton has a pretty good coaching tree as well. So if it's a Payton disciple, if it's a McVay disciple, I don't think you would. I don't want to say you won't go wrong because there are always some of those branches that don't pan out, but it doesn't hurt to at least check those branches out, see what they would do if given that head coaching position, or in the case of Webb, Schleelhouse, other guys, even if you end up hiring them as your OC, you're giving them a promotion over their current jobs, and they're coming off of really good coaching staffs and putting them in a position to then get a head coaching job sooner rather than later.
One name that's super interesting as well. And listen, I haven't really landed on who I think the Bills should. I'm throwing out ideas. People are going nuts about the Davis Webb mention. He's getting head coach interviews, guys. He's super tight. He's one of the young offensive minds in the league that's getting a ton of buzz. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Especially, I think you could do a lot worse as your offensive coordinator, to be honest with you. I like Davis Webb a lot. I'm not advocating for it. I'm ruminating on all of the ideas. One report that's out there from NFL Network, potentially future Hall of Fame quarterback Philip Rivers is expected to get at least one head coaching interview this cycle. Ryan, how does that hit you?
Like a ton of bricks. Stupid idea. No. The guy was
not for the Bills. I just mean Rivers being a head coach. Like,
he was coaching high school football before he came out of retirement, correct? High school. Right. Come on now. Yeah. Come on now. I like Philip Rivers.
The thing that would be interesting about it for me, and I'm just throwing this out there, I do think it's kind of funny. I don't know. He is a leader, right? Like, he is a guy that commands a building. And if you just want a guy to come in and run the organization and run the game and have somebody call plays, have somebody call the defense, and you want Philip Rivers to kind of run things, the dude's brilliant. I mean, I was watching that Monday night game, I think it was, when Indy was playing, and he, off the couch 4 years, was putting the defense they were playing against in a blender with some of the pre-snap stuff that he was doing. He's a brilliant football mind. I don't have a huge problem with it. I just think, man, we're going 0 to 100 real quick if Philip Rivers gets into this convo.
Sure, and maybe he can be a player coach too while we're at it. He can back up Josh Allen and save some money for No, Rivers needs to get some actual experience if he wants to be a head coach in the NFL. It would probably go as well as when Jeff Saturday just kind of rolled off his couch and got that interim job with the Colts. He won the first game, and then they looked terribly out of place in every other matchup for the most part. If you want to go young, if you want to go with someone that's not necessarily proven, at least let it be someone that's been in the coaching ranks in the NFL for a few years, working with some brilliant minds. I get it. Rivers is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. In that Monday night game, he was telling the defense exactly what they were going to do pre-snap So yeah, he has a great mind for the game, but there's not enough there for me to say, let's bring this guy in even for an interview.
If you're watching across all three platforms right now, thank you so much for making the Shout Emergency podcast part of your life. We're almost at 7,000 across all the platforms. I mean, big news day, obviously. Super chat here from the Mutant Moose. Been in the playoffs for so long that we forgot how difficult it was to get there consistently. Very likely that this ends poorly and we waste more of Josh's career. Should have been Brandon Beane. How does that hit you, Ryan?
Well, one, I would watch a show about a mutant moose, first of all. I watched one about mutant Ninja Turtles, so sign me up for that. But, there's risk. We've said this. There's risk involved. But the Bills apparently reached their breaking point with Sean McDermott. It's not a guarantee that it's going to go well. It's not a guarantee it's going to go poorly. They might hit on one of these young offensive minds that comes in and really does help Buffalo get over the top, where they're, hey, if these opposing teams are going to score 30 on us, we're going to put up 40 on them. Maybe that's how it plays out. But yeah, there's certainly risk involved. Maybe this blows up on Buffalo, and whoever they hire, it ends up being like a 2-year thing, and they're right back to the drawing board again. You don't know how this is going to play out. Remember, Mike McDaniel was supposed to be a sure thing in Miami. And early on, he had them scoring 70 points. He had that offense looking good, and it all fell apart late for him. And listen, I wouldn't be shocked if Buffalo at least kicks the tires on him, but there's no sure thing unless you're somehow getting a Sean Payton who gets fired. I'm not putting Vrabel in that discussion, but Vrabel was a solid head coach with the Titans for many, many years, became available. There are guys that you feel more confident about, but in the case of Buffalo, I think they're probably going to go with an unproven head coach, and there's risk with that.
So I want to say something too. Like, I think the arc of Sean McDermott has been something we'll spend the next couple of weeks talking about. I mean, the place that he has in franchise history, I think, will only improve with time. What he accomplished in 9 years for an organization, and why I was always hesitant to really get fully on board with a coaching change is, you look at the numbers, Ryan. I mean, a 662, I believe it is, winning percentage, 98 career wins. He has the third highest win percentage among active coaches. He's been really excellent as a head coach in Buffalo. And I think the hardened way that he came in and changed the culture, but also changed the dynamics in the building. I mean, I've heard stories about folks that have covered the Rex Ryan era Bills and regimes before that, and it was a free-for-all. And the professionalism of the organization, I think that, played out in Terry Pegula's statement there a little bit. I think that the humanizing of Sean McDermott over the last 3 years, really a lot since the Ty Dunn story came out, and he really had to take a long look in the mirror at who he was and how he interacted with things. I have never talked to a former player that didn't love Sean and love playing. Now, a few had their issues with him, but even the ones that had the issues with him still pretty much spoke glowingly about him. So this is a massive moment in the franchise's history. It could be a huge turning point. It could go in the opposite direction, but that's what's going to make covering this thing over the next couple of months really interesting.
Yeah, winning in this league is not easy, and I hope fans don't take that for granted, because McDermott was a winner year in and year out. Year one, taking that roster to the playoffs was an accomplishment all in of itself. And then obviously rookie Josh Allen, that roster wasn't good enough. But from that point on, they were consistently in the playoffs. And I get it. You want to win it all. You don't want a Marvin Lewis situation where you're good enough to get there, or a Mike Tomlin as of late in Pittsburgh where you get in, but then you're one and done. But he was winning some games. He was putting them in position in championship games, losing by 3. And it's not going to be just a guarantee that the next guy that comes in is going to be able to replicate that level of success.
Another super chat here from Charles. With Beane having control, does that change anything about looking for an offensive, defensive head coach? Will Beane work better with the same system, but a better head coach and more control, or does he need an offensive head coach? I don't think it's about needing one or the other. I think it's going to have to be a personality fit. It's going to have to be a fit for what Josh Allen does. I've always been a little bit hesitant with the idea that the West Coast offense is the one that or a derivative of that. I mean, the Mike McDaniel offense is best for Josh Allen. I mean, I thought Brian Dable's offense was sensational for Josh Allen, and then all the iterations that it came since. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. I think Josh is going to have a seat at the table. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be in the interviews, but I'm sure he has his thoughts on, who he wants to play for and what goes into that. What I think you have to guard against, if you're Brandon Beane and Pete Gwelly is making this decision based solely on what Josh wants, right? Because I think that there's an emotional element that comes with Brian Dable that you may want to guard against. You want to make the best decision that puts your team in the best spot. And I think if you look at some of the success that has been had, Kansas City is the most recent example. Like, you probably want an offensive head coach that you could pair with your quarterback and put all your resources into that, bring in a really good defensive coordinator that can, bring in a good staff and develop players and play consistently good defense. But I think that I think all options are on the table. And there's also a report out right now that Sean McDermott told his staff today that he plans on continuing to coach. So he is going to be a hot commodity for a lot of teams around the league. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Miami, because I'd imagine he's probably pretty pissed off right now.
Yeah. Hey, I've had success in this division. I think that he could use that as a selling point to Miami. I can help this team down the stretch where they've really struggled. It's going to be fascinating to see where he lands. And, with the Bills, the one thing I will say about Brian Dable, he doesn't sugarcoat things with Josh. If Josh does something stupid, he's going to get, right up in there in his business about it. He did it as his OC, and I think that helped Allen at times. And I'm not sitting here saying Allen was coddled or anything like that, but I do think someone that's going to tell Allen, like, when he's sugar high Josh, you need to stop that. You need to get it under control. It's not the worst thing in the world. Do I think there's probably going to be better young candidates that I would at least look into first? Yes, but Dable, with his track record with Allen, having some experience as a head coach, I know how I went year one with the Giants versus these late game collapses this past year that cost him his job, but he's going to be on the list. I'd be shocked if he wasn't.
All right, a couple things. I think there's massive changing coming to the defense, I would imagine, but
Yeah.
some reaction from some of the Bills players. Jordan Phillips, who said yesterday at locker cleanout that he would come back. He was considering coming back. He didn't know yet, but it would only be for the Bills. He posted on Instagram, "This shit here is so stupid, honestly sickening. The best coach I've ever been around." Taron Johnson just posted an Instagram story, SMH, shake my head. Some of the instant reaction from Bills players to this news. I mean, obviously those are two defensive players that played a lot of years for Sean McDermott.
Yeah.
It's the shock is it's hitting the locker room as well. It'll be interesting. And obviously this happens after locker cleanout, so we don't get a lot of player reaction, and hopefully maybe I can connect with Mitch Morse at some point this week to talk about it. But man, what a day.
Did you read all of Jordan Phillips's quote? I'm sorry, I may have.
Oh yeah, did you? Yeah,
I found his quote on his Instagram story, so I just wasn't sure if that was.
The whole quote was. Hang on, I had it up and now it's gone. Hang on. Oh, here it is. This shit here is so stupid, honestly sickening. The best coach I've ever been around.
So I don't think he's coming back then. I think that his whole "I'll come back for another year" only to the Bills, I think that was tied to McDermott, quite honestly. And that's no knock on Phillips or anything like that, but maybe that was the other thing too, is maybe the Bills were a little bit too dependent on the old guard with bringing back the retreads, and I'm sure Beane had a say in that as well. But it's going to be fascinating to hear as more things come out over the next few days and weeks, everything that played into this decision.
All right, we're at 50 minutes. I think that's going to do it for this episode. We'll have you covered as this thing unfolds. We'll probably hear when we from the Bills, and when we get a chance to talk to Brandon. I wouldn't be surprised if that press conference is coming today, maybe tomorrow, but we'll see if they get all their ducks in a row. We have not gotten any communication on that. As soon as we hear from him, we'll be back with the podcast. I'm going to work to maybe get some other folks on here to talk about what this means. We'll have a big off-season primer with some bold predictions that just took a real big turn with what might be in play with Mike Giannetti from Spot Track. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for joining us. Almost 7,000 people across all platforms. We really appreciate it. Ryan, final thought.
Final thought, stick with us because, if Beane goes today, I'm sure we'll be back today or tomorrow at the latest. We're going to have a lot of content here on Shout as well as on nyup.com and syracuse.com.
And don't forget, before we get out of here, Shout is brought to you by Amtrak. And you can head over to Amtrak.com right now and save almost 50% off on the USA Rail Pass for $250. Celebrate America's big 250th birthday with big savings on US Rail Pass. From now through January 20th, you can purchase the best-selling pass for only $250. That's $249 in savings. Take 10 rides over 30 days to your choice of 500 destinations for over $25 per trip. I don't know, Ryan. Maybe me and you got to do like a little off-season Amtrak podcast series where we go to a bunch of different places. That would be awesome. So
I love it. Sign me up.
All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Don't get too comfortable. We might be right back. See you later.